Hello my Dawsonites, and welcome back to Dawson ASMR. I am Dawson, and you're my Dawsonites, as you named yourself. And in today's video, I know it's not Halloween. I've said this before in my scary story time, but I love anything horror, scary. I love it. So you may be wondering why I'm not in a dark room, and why I'm in front of a green screen that I haven't decided what I'm going to put in the background yet. I don't know what it'll be. That is because I need light to shed on this story. I'm going to be reading from Ghost Hunters by Ed and Lorraine Warren. If you do not know Ed and Lorraine Warren, you may not know that you know them. If you've ever seen the film The Conjuring, the ghost hunters that come in, that is the depiction of Ed and Lorraine Warren. Annabelle, that is the depiction of Ed and Lorraine Warren. Yes, they are very known paranormal researchers. And it says true stories from the world's most famous demonologists. And I got this from a friend who is a ghost hunter. He's not a demonologist, but he says he's kind of a ghost hunter, basically. And he lent me this because I love anything horror and scary, and I love Ed and Lorraine Warren. And as I've said in the past, I've reached out to their son in times of desperate need. So, I'm going to read a case file. There's maybe 10 cases in this book. Amityville cases in here. Not reading that today because it's only an interview. And I haven't read anything in this book yet, mind you. So, today we're going to be reading case file, The Exorcism and the Teenage Girl. Okay? So, it says, whenever we give talks, the one question people usually ask concerns exorcisms and the book and film The Exorcist. They want to know if The Exorcist presents a realistic portrait of being possessed by a demon and having that demon driven out through the difficult and often dangerous process of exorcism. Our reply is that yes, in most respects, The Exorcist is a fine and truthful work. Thinking this book's about The Exorcist. Perhaps even more important, both the book and the film help people understand that there is a spirit realm surrounding us, and that sometimes ordinary lives can be pulled into this realm, and sometimes never escape. During our world travels, Ed and I met a most splendid priest named Father Michael Elimni. A Nigerian, Father Elimni was spending a few weeks at a college in Nova Scotia when we first saw him. After our talk, he came forward and introduced himself, telling us about the world of the supernatural as it manifested itself in his native Africa. We knew immediately that we were in the presence of a most gifted man. He spoke fluently of the supernatural and of terrifying incidents in his native land. A small, most dignified man, he possessed the gravity peculiar to people who had done battle with the spirit realm. While he often smiled and laughed, you could see in his dark eyes a somber wisdom that no amount of joviality could quite chase away. Instantly we became the best of friends, and over the next few years our paths crossed in ways we knew to be fated. 2 years after our first meeting, while Ed and I were completing a book, we learned that Father Elimni was staying for a few months at a Catholic rectory in New Hampshire. No sooner had we called him, happy to plan a long, luxurious weekend together, then we received a disturbing phone call that would unite the three of us in an angry battle with the world of possession and demons. The case illustrated perfectly a point we make frequently in our lectures. Many people who become possessed bring this situation on themselves. We spoke for 45 minutes to nearly a hysterical woman who told us many sad things about her 16-year-old daughter. Now, I should say at this point that we receive many phone calls from distraught people. Given our national television appearances, and the extensive coverage our cases have received in the press, we're well known to people who believe they're having problems with demonic infestation, which can result in many things, including possession. Our experience has taught us, however, that many such infestations are in fact the result of psychological problems, and as a consequence we often refer to callers to priests, psychiatrists, and social workers. Psychiatrists, my bad. This woman's call was different. What she outlined was the classic pattern through which a demon is called unwittingly into a home, virtually invited by someone in that home to take over his or her life. We returned the woman's call, telling her that a priest familiar with the rites of exorcism would be joining us. The woman, grateful, then confided one piece of information that she had kept from us. In order to meet and interview her daughter, we'd have to travel downstate New Hampshire, where the girl was presently being held in a mental institution. And that was written by Lorraine Warren. So there's just some more writing in it. Doesn't say who it's by. Call her 𝐬𝐭𝐚𝐲. 15 years old. Taffy-colored hair touching slender shoulders. A pretty if slightly melancholy face. A virgin in the strict sense, though she was experimented with a few boys in the same way that she experimented a few times with marijuana. A good but not spectacular high school student. 3 nights a week and both days of the weekend, Cindy spent the time where the rest of her friends do, at the nearby shopping mall. There she wanders through stores looking at clothes, records, jewelry. Mostly, however, she sits at one of the tables that surround a small shop called the Hot Dog Hutch, which is where the boys she's interested in also sit. Time at the hutch consists of joking, gossiping, and making plans for the weekend nights. Plans that never seem to come true. Usually Cindy spends Saturday night in the company of her girlfriends. Generally this means a movie at the fourplex located across the mall's wide parking lot. None of the boys Cindy likes ask her out, and this has led not only to frustration, but to a growing sense that there's something wrong with her. Other girls get dates, but not Cindy. Does her mirror lie? Is she not as attractive as her reflection leads her to believe? A few months before all this begins, a friend of hers says one day, "Cindy, your problem is that you try too hard. You scare boys away." Secretly, Cindy admits that this is probably true, but every time she gets around a boy she likes, she finds herself becoming this shrill, slightly pushy girl. She scarcely recognizes herself. On a rainy April afternoon, the Saturday shoppers happy to be in the artificial warmth and the light of the mall, Cindy finds herself alone. 2 friends have the flu, another has gone to visit her brother at college. And if any of the boys who pass in and out of the hutch are interested in her, they seem to be keeping this fact a secret. Cindy eats a lunch of grilled cheese sandwich and a Diet Coke. Ironically, for all the time she spends at the hutch, she hates the tart taste of hot dogs. And then, having nothing better to do, begins walking around the mall. Near the north end of the sprawling shopping complex, there are tiny storefronts that house businesses that appear and die as quickly as fireflies on a hot summer night. These businesses are usually specialty shops. Variously, they have included a place that custom-made dolls, a macrame boutique, and a business that allows you to make your own rock video, and they are doomed in an almost sad way to failure. By mid-afternoon, Cindy had wandered down to this end of the mall. She notices that one of the tiny storefronts houses a new business, the Antique Attic. Cindy goes inside. Actually, she has no interest whatsoever in antiques, and begins browsing through the merchandise. Many of the items are tagged with descriptive notes that make no sense to her. Neoclassic and diamond-faceted and golden stoneware. The shopkeeper offers Cindy a wan smile, but nothing else. Obviously, teenagers are not particularly welcome in such a place. Cindy's about ready to leave when she notices near the back, above an aged Jack-in-the-Box, something she's long been curious about. A Ouija board. Cindy feels the sort of excitement that fills her when a cute boy passes. She stands on tiptoes and takes the board down and begins to look at it. She has no idea how long she's been standing there, staring at the somewhat spattered board with its letters and occult symbols, before the owner comes up behind her. "May I help you?" "This board." "Yes." "It's for sale?" The woman smiles. "Yes, and very inexpensively." "Really?" The woman smiles again. "I took it as part of a big lot of things. Actually, it sort of gives me the creeps. I don't like, supernatural things." Saturday being allowance day, Cindy has $10 in her pocket. "Would you take $5 for it?" "I'd be happy to." 5 minutes later, the Ouija board under her arm, Cindy leaves the store, to be caught up in the flow of mall traffic once again. "I feel something," Nancy said. "Feel something?" Cindy asked. "Like what?" "Like something in this room, some kind of presence or something. Really, Cindy, really." Nancy 𝐬𝐭𝐚𝐲 was a very plump girl with a strikingly appealing face. Now she sat cross-legged on Cindy's bed. For the past 3 months, Cindy had been experimenting with the Ouija board. At first, her experiments were little more than idle fun. She did not believe the board had any powers, magical or otherwise. But Nancy's sudden fear and the oppressive gray day gave Cindy an involuntary chill. "Nancy, don't you know we're just playing?" "Listen." "To what?" "Shh. Listen. Hear it?" "Hear what?" "Listen." Much as she didn't want to admit it, Cindy did in fact hear a vague rasping noise. It seemed to be coming from the wall beneath her Michael Jackson poster. From inside the wall. Cindy laughed, telling herself that spooks and phantoms didn't appear in bedrooms filled with stuffed animals, records, and tapes, and a wall filled with snapshots of high school heartthrobs. Spooks and phantoms appeared only at night inside shadowy mansions, right? But as she sat there watching her friend Nancy become more and more frightened, Cindy knew that she was in fact hearing something. A noise like that of something scratching to get out. To be set free. Nancy jumped up from the bed and said, "I'm sorry, Cindy, I can't do this anymore. Nancy, if you're my friend, you'll stay here with me and see what happens." Cindy's eyes were fixed on the Michael Jackson poster. Her ears were fixed on the scratching, which was becoming more and more like clawing. As she rushed to the door in freedom, Nancy said, "You should get rid of that board, Cindy, before it's too late, before something really terrible happens." Cindy stared down at the board, square with chipping paint and lurid occult symbols. The thing resembled something that had been lifted from a trash can. It could have no powers at all, the clawing. "You better tell your mother what's going on here, Cindy. You better tell her right now." Nancy slammed the door behind her. Cindy, lying back on the bed, could hear her friend's feet slapping down the stairs. Then distantly below, the front door slammed. Cindy started to close her eyes to get control of herself in the moment when the noise inside the wall grew louder. The clawing. Cindy's love of food was notorious. Whether it was McDonald's or a pricey restaurant, Cindy would always linger long after the others were through, eating with the appetite of a farmhand at day's end. Fortunately, her metabolism was such that none of her indulgences showed. Slender, quick, she had the sort of figure most girls wanted. But lately, this was now 4 months after bringing the Ouija board into her home, friends noticed that Cindy no longer ate much. Her once splendid figure was now gaunt, and her merry blue eyes seemed dulled, as if light deep within them had ceased glowing. Friends weren't the only ones concerned about Cindy. Teachers, counselors, and family members tried to find out what was going on with her. What could possibly be affecting her life so drastically? Cindy's mother. "It was about that time that I heard the noises up in her room." Her father, who was a doctor and who likes logical explanations for everything, said that Cindy was merely singing along with her tapes. But I didn't think so. There was a disturbing quality to the sound, almost like moaning. And then one day, I realized what it was, and I had a most difficult time dealing with it. What I seemed to be hearing were the sounds of people making love. At first, I just refused to believe it. We raised Cindy in a very proper way, and even though she did occasionally spend time with a boy, I just knew that she was still a virgin. I didn't want to rush up into her room and make a fool of myself. For the next few days, I contented myself with my husband's explanation that Cindy was just going up to her room and singing along with the tapes she likes to play. But one Thursday, the moaning got very loud, so loud that my youngest son began smiling, knowing to himself. So I went up the stairs, knocked on the door, and went in. By that time, I had prepared myself for the worst. I had assumed that Cindy had let a boy into her room, perhaps he climbed up the latticework on the back of the house, and that they were making love in Cindy's bed. I was astonished to find Cindy on her bed with the headphones on, listening to music. She was all alone. She was as startled as I. She took off her headphones and asked why I was there. Something in her tone told me that she was no longer the daughter I knew. For the first time, I saw how much weight she'd lost. How dark the circles under her eyes were. How she'd taken to biting her nails until they were bloody. Then I saw the Ouija board. Because we have a cleaning woman come in twice a week, I don't often go into Cindy's room. You know how teenagers are about their privacy. I'd never noticed the Ouija board before. While my husband was raised Protestant, I was raised a strict Catholic, and even a glance at the Ouija board told me it was a sinister presence. I asked Cindy why she'd have such a thing in her room, and she told me that it was none of my business. Only rarely did she talk to me in this way. I reached over for the board, but she slapped my hand away. "Leave it alone. It's mine," she said. Her voice wasn't normal. There was a different timbre to it. Once again, I reached out to take the board from her. This time, instead of slapping my hand away, she grabbed my arm. Her grasp was incredibly strong and hurt me a great deal. For the first time in my life, I was afraid of my daughter. Tears in my eyes, I left her room with Cindy behind me, clutching her board protectively, cuddling it the way you would an infant. She stayed in her room until her father got home. When I told him what had happened, he immediately went upstairs. He got the same response from Cindy. She seemed upset and angry, and she wouldn't let him so much as touch the Ouija board. When he came downstairs, his face was a chalky white, and he had nothing to say. He went to the den and sat there in the darkness for half an hour. I'd never seen him so defeated. There's no other way to describe it. I've never been sure what happened up there, but something took away my husband's self-confidence. He seemed broken by the experience. The next 3 weeks in the McBain home became the sort of nightmare Cindy's mother would otherwise have considered commonly only on cheap TV movies. The clawing in the walls became so pronounced that it could be heard throughout the house. The sound of sexual ecstasy emanating from Cindy's room could now be heard as far away as the formal dining room. Cindy herself became a virtual stranger, given to sudden rages and inconsolable sobbing. A minister, a priest, and a psychiatrist were consulted. None were able to help. Cindy quit school, quit eating all of her substances, and would not directly address any member of her family. Her father, desperate, broke into her room in an attempt to steal the Ouija board and destroy it. He had taken no more than 2 or 3 steps across the threshold before Cindy flung herself at him, slapping him viciously, slamming his head into the wall again and again. Though a grown man and a strong one, Dr. McBain was forced to use all his strength to push his daughter away. A quick search of the room while Cindy hurled a variety of objects at him revealed nothing. Cindy had obviously hidden the Ouija board. In 2 more weeks, after 3 sessions with a psychiatrist, Cindy McBain was taken to a psychiatric hospital upstate. It was at this time that her mother contacted the Warrens. Mrs. McBain said even though she'd been hospitalized and given several different kinds of tranquilizers, Cindy had not calmed down to any appreciable degree. She still flew into rages and she still consulted her Ouija board. That was the most perplexing thing of it all. Somehow Cindy had managed to sneak the Ouija board into the hospital. We have no idea how she did this. But late one night, an attendant came into her room and saw her there in the moonlight, on her bed, the Ouija board in front of her. On an overcast spring day, Lorraine and Ed Warren drove to the rectory to pick up Father 𝐬𝐿𝐼𝐚. The trio drove first to the McBain home, where Mrs. McBain showed them Cindy's room and revealed 2 key points she had not discussed on the phone. Ed says, the first thing she told us was that Cindy's experimentation had gone much farther than just the Ouija board. She and her friends had been buying paperbacks in the cult and trying out many of the oaths and rituals they found in the books. Cindy had been much more deeply immersed in the supernatural than her mother had led us to believe. The second thing Mrs. McBain told us was that she herself had been a black shape moving down the upstairs hallway one day. She had seen one. The shape seemed to be composed of black fog. It had gone into Cindy's room. Mrs. McBain had been afraid to tell anybody, including us, about the shape because she assumed that we would think she was losing her mind. Any doubts we had about demonic infestation and possession were gone now. This was a classic case of somebody experimenting with the occult and virtually, if not literally, inviting the demon into the household. We told Mrs. McBain that we should reach Cindy as soon as possible. She phoned ahead to the hospital and told the doctor in charge what we intended to do. While he was reluctant to cooperate at first, he did finally agree that none of his attempts to help Cindy had worked. Mrs. McBain pressed the matter, and the doctor told us to come ahead. She then phoned her husband in his office. He said he would meet us in 2 hours at the hospital where Cindy was a patient. The hospital was a brooding shape of brick set against a deep forest. Iron gates stopped you at the main entrance. An armed guard in a rain poncho appeared, certain to their business, and let the car pass. Inside, the hospital walls were painted in restful earth tones. Nurses in stretched white uniforms moved about efficiently. Dr. Gertner greeted the group on the 3rd floor and after some consultation took the Warrens, Father 𝐬𝐿𝐼𝐚, and Mrs. McBain into Cindy's room. Dr. McBain was already there. He sat solemnly on the edge of his daughter's bed in the small, clean room. Cindy, wearing a pair of blue silk pajamas, her hair caught back in the soft chignon, paid no attention whatsoever to them. Her eyes were dull to an unseeing madness, as if she were responsive only to voices within, the same way some schizophrenics behave. Dr. McBain greeted her this arrival sadly and then let them proceed. Before going to the McBain home, Father 𝐬𝐿𝐼𝐚 and the Warrens had discussed their plans, which the priest now carried out. As he quietly approached the girl, uttered soft and assuring words, Father 𝐬𝐿𝐼𝐚 took from inside his black garb a small crucifix. Cindy began screaming. The priest had not yet even raised the crucifix against Cindy's knee before she dragged back into the corner of her bed and began cursing the small man foully. Shocked, her parents began pleading with her to behave. The Warrens calmed them down and said that all this was a necessary part of the plan. Cindy's eyes changed from blue to a deep amber color, and silver spittle formed at the corners of her mouth. Father 𝐬𝐿𝐼𝐚 began speaking not to the girl, but to the demon inside her. "You will be banished," he said. Cindy reached up and tried to slap the crucifix from the priest's hand. Dr. McBain led a sobbing wife from the room. The Warrens and Father 𝐬𝐿𝐼𝐚 stood over Cindy. "We're here to help you," Lorraine said gently, "and we can help you." The demon made a throaty, threatening noise inside Cindy's chest. Father 𝐬𝐿𝐼, knowing exactly what was going on, withdrew the crucifix. Ed said, "We'll be back soon, Cindy. Very soon." The next 18 hours were rushed. Father 𝐬𝐿𝐼 had to obtain permission from the rectory where he was staying to perform an exorcism. He also requested another priest to assist him with the ritual. After much discussion, the Chancellor agreed to Father 𝐬𝐿𝐼's request. We'd always known that Father 𝐬𝐿𝐼 was special even for a priest, but to see him fast and meditate in preparation for the exorcism was one of the most moving experiences in our lives, Lorraine said. "It's called a black fast," Ed added. "All the priest eats are small amounts of bread and water." Father 𝐬𝐿𝐼 spent most of the time alone praying. He walked a great deal and we started to worry about his physical endurance. We wondered if such a small man could stand up to all this, especially the exorcism itself, which is one of the most physical demanding rites in the church. For an exorcism, the priest wears a purple stole symbolizing penance and humility. The priest begs God through prayers to free the possessed person of the demon. One part of the ceremony consists of adorations to the devil, demanding that Satan, in the name of Christ, the Blessed Virgin, and all the saints, leave the person or home immediately. In some cases, the ritual consists of the priest demanding that the spirit or spirits speak out and identify themselves. Finally, there are the instruments the priest uses: holy water, a crucifix, and a relic of a saint, which are all applied to the body in the same fashion, touched to the head or breast. For example, in the course of an exorcism. Despite popular misconceptions, there is no chanting during the ritual. The priest prays in a loud, strong voice, many times in Latin. The priest assisting him sees that certain candles stay lit, and that crutes for water and wine, a missal, small hand bells, and a gold chalice are at hand. He becomes, in effect, an altar boy. This was the scene in Cindy's hospital room 2 days later as a cold, harsh rain fell outside, and as a nervous psychiatrist paced the hall wondering if he was doing the right thing by letting the ritual go forward. By now, Father 𝐬𝐿𝐼 was showing the effects of the black fast. His hands twitched, his eyes seemed glassy from the lack of sleep, and his voice was little more than a rasp. The exorcism began. Lorraine says, "What most people don't realize is how violent such a ceremony can become. The demon has possessed a body and soul and does not want to let go." Cindy looked as if she were being shot with invisible bullets. She writhed on the bed, and sometimes her screams sounded like sexual ecstasy. Sometimes her screams were pure pain. But Father 𝐬𝐿𝐼 was not turned back. He spoke to the demon, and the demon responded in an angry voice. Father 𝐬𝐿𝐼 continued the ritual. Loud thumping sounds came from inside the wall. A fetid odor filled the room. You had to cover your mouth and nose. The young priest who was assisting looked very frightened, but it's a credit to his courage that he kept right on going, doing what he was supposed to do, and never leaving Father 𝐬𝐿𝐼's side. Cindy hurled objects at the wall, screaming obscenities, moving around on the bed, taking some kind of sexual pleasure, and finally, as the demon's voice was beginning to fade inside her, lay still on the bed. Sometimes you worry that the person may have died from all the strain. The entire ritual took the better part of an hour, and when it was completed, Father 𝐬𝐿𝐼's knees began to buckle. He had to be supported. You can't be sure at first if the exorcism has been successful. The priest packed all their instruments and went out into the hall with the rest of us to wait. After half an hour, the McBains went in to see their daughter. When we entered the room, Cindy opened her eyes, and I felt the first real hope I'd known in months, Dr. McBain said. Her eyes were back to normal, and there was even a small smile on her face. I hadn't noticed just how distorted Cindy's voice had become during all this until I walked into the room after the exorcism. She'd always had a soft, pleasant voice, but the demon had made it harsh, very unfeminine. Now she sounded like her daughter again, added Mrs. McBain. 4 days later, Cindy went home. Once there, she showed again how loving a daughter she could be. She insisted on straightening her room, helping her mother with dinner, and being pleasant to her younger brother. Father 𝐬𝐿𝐼, drained completely of his former zest, went into a withdrawal period common to priests who have performed an exorcism. Gradually, over the course of the next 5 days, he began to regain his strength. Lorraine, recalling this period, smiles. His favorite dessert was ice cream, which we gave him plenty during his recovery. I remember the very first time we offered him ice cream. He put a small spoonful of it in his tongue and let it melt. His entire face lit up with pleasure. It was childlike, a beautiful memory for us. Unfortunately, this particular case did not have a happy ending for any of the participants, Ed said. 3 weeks after going back home, the demon reappeared, or had just been lying dormant, inside Cindy. She was taken back to the hospital where doctors debated the best way to treat her. Some scoffed at the whole notion of demons and exorcisms. Others weren't so sure. Cindy, now a young woman, leads a somewhat normal life, but she is always subject to what her doctor calls attacks. He calls it mental illness, but we know better. As for our good friend Father 𝐬𝐿𝐼, he returned to native Nigeria, which was, at the time, in the throes of a civil war. The revolutionary government hated the Catholic Church and was known to execute priests and nuns. Right after his return, Father Alumni was seen by some other priest, but he soon disappeared. He had never been seen again. It's assumed that he was murdered. So, that is the story. It's a case file from Ed and Lorraine Warren's book, Ghost Hunters. You can pick this up. I don't know where you can get it. Probably Amazon, maybe. If I find a link to Amazon, I'll link it below. But thank you guys so much for watching. I really do hope you enjoyed this video. If you did and you want to see more like this, comment down below. I'm about to read some more out of this book. I love scary stories. So, I will see you next time. Remember, you're beautiful, you're wonderful, and you're loved. Bye, guys.